Now, joining me in this studio is a Bloxwich man who has worked with the likes of this lot.
Rock your body, yeah. Everybody, yeah. Rock your body right. Backstreet's back, alright.
There you go, Kylie, Backstreet Boys, the Stone Roses, Justin Timberlake, Britney. What a CV. Steve Jenkins has worked with them all, and he is back in the West Midlands today for the launch of his new book, The Future is in the History, about life growing up in Walsall during the 50s and 60s. That's what your book's about then. Does it tell us about your amazing career in music?
It does.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear that as well. Yeah.
Goes right the way through, actually. So it's an autobiography, and it goes... the first 2 or 3 chapters, obviously, are about growing up in Walsall and go to school there, Joseph Leckey and Walsall College, and then getting a job and becoming a DJ, and then eventually getting into the record business, and then a long period of time before, I guess, the world famous Jive Records and all those hits.
Well, hugely famous record label Jive, and incredible pedigree. So just tell us about growing up then in the back streets of Walsall. You're a Bloxwich lad, yeah?
Yeah, my family comes from Bloxwich, and then they kind of settled in Leamore, and then my mum worked was a supervisor at Woolworths in Park Street, and my dad was the footwear manager of Walsall Co-op in Bridge Street. And so, I'm a Walsall boy. And
through and through,
yeah,
absolutely. Rooted in the place, yeah.
Absolutely.
And obviously at some point, as I guess many of us do, you started listening to records and falling in love with the music bit.
Well, yeah, I blame my dad, really. He started to play me records when I was very young because he was a drummer in a band called the Rhythm Rascals. If anybody's around that still remembers the Rhythm Rascals.
What sort of period was that, Steve?
Oh, well, he'd be a young man then, so I don't know, that might have been the 40s or something.
Oh,
late
blimey,
40s,
yeah.
I think the height of their fame was they were the resident band at the Gaumont Theatre in Walsall.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
So, of course, my dad loved music, and so he'd bring records home. And from when I was very small, he'd sit me down and say, listen to this and listen to that. And so the whole thing started to build from there, really. And then he bought me Please Please Me by the Beatles for my 10th birthday, that first album. Well, I played that album over and over and over again. I knew all the lyrics. He bought me a guitar as well, which I thrashed any chord and yelled my head off to the Please Please Me album. And I guess it all pretty much started from there.
And then you went on to become what now sounds like a really kind of conventional, in some respects, kind of career option, but then was, I guess, quite a cutting edge thing to do. You became a DJ. I mean, Jimmy Savile talks about it, doesn't he? Where he claimed to be the first DJ.
Yes,
it's standard now, but the idea of taking what was then one of those old dance set type record players into a room and choosing the records and playing it. That was quite a radical thing to do.
Well, absolutely. And I think the boys back then were pretty much entertainers. We spoke. It's not like they do in the clubs now. We spoke in between every record. We built it up. We had runs of records where we'd get the crowd going and build it up, slow it down, build it up, slow it down. So You know, I love my years in the clubs, actually.
And when are we talking there? Sort of mid to late 60s then? You got into being a DJ?
Actually, what was about the year then? I would say it was probably 1970.
Yeah. And what sort of places were you kind of being a DJ then? Because by then, I suppose we'd got past that Jimmy Savile stage. People were starting to have proper sound systems. And
yeah, absolutely. We were past Jimmy by then. The first residency I had was a club called Barnaby's in Lichfield. And then the next place that I worked was Barbarella's in Birmingham, which I loved.
Yeah, well, I old enough, young enough to remember Barb's in the punk days. I used to sneak in the back
I think
with
I
the
was
bands.
I think I was there before the punk days.
Were you?
Yeah. It was early 70s for me.
Yes.
You know, so I was in Barbarella's and Rebecca's and the Rum Runner and Mr. Moon's and Chaplin's.
I know all these names, I have to confess.
So
I
I worked in all those clubs, you know, prior to and after I joined a record label.
So you've got this, you know, great grounding in music through your dad and a love of music, and you've obviously then steeped in it and earning your living then as a DJ around and about the West Midlands. Yeah,
I was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and then so how do you make the leap from that then? Because there's so many people out there now doing that, thinking, oh, you know, it's a great job to do, great fun to be had, but then how do you make the leap into actually being involved in the industry proper, if you know what I mean?
By mistake, to be honest, Adrian.
Like most things that happen in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, you know, I decided that I wanted to make my living out of being... I thought I was going to be a DJ and a broadcaster, but I definitely wanted to make my living out of music and records. And so, actually, the person that gets the blame for getting me in the record business is Sue Buckler, who's still a promotion lady now and gets artists for your show even today. What I was doing, I was working 6 nights a week in the clubs. And to be fair, I wasn't paying any tax. So Sue, yes, they're going to chase me for that 40 years on.
Yeah.
So anyway, Sue was then working in Graduate Records in Walsall. And so I went to Graduate Records and said, you know, I haven't got a job a couple of days a week because I figured I could pay tax a couple of days a week and keep the money in the evening, you know.
Yeah. Keep them off your back.
Little bit naive, and my mum was on my back to pay a bit of tax. And it was Sue that opened Music Week and said, look, you know, you should be working for a record company. Everything that you know and the records that you choose when you come in here and buy, you should work for a record company. And she showed me an advert that said promotion man wanted for record label. It didn't even say what record label. And she said, you should apply for that. And if you get in, and when you get in, you get me in as well. And so that basically I applied for the job.
Yeah.
Had an interview, didn't think much of it, came back, got called back for a second interview. On my 21st birthday, they give me a job. I'm in the record business. You know, so it was mistake, really.
Yeah. And from then on, I suppose you start, you know, putting your feelers out, you start working your way through the business. At one point in your career, I think I'm right in saying you actually signed Britney Spears, is that right?
Well, you know, that's a bit of a giant, that's probably 20 years on from joining the record business. But yeah, Britney actually auditioned for us. She'd been on the Mickey Mouse Club. And the way we got to Britney
And what's that? That's a TV show in the States, yeah?
Yeah, you remember like the Saturday morning TV shows that used to be on in England?
Yeah.
The Mickey Mouse Club was for kids, you know, so Britney was on there from the time she was 11 years old till when she was 13. And then the show got cancelled. So Britney then decided that she wanted to be a singer, you know, because she was singing on the show, so she wanted to make records. And so a lawyer, actually, Larry Rudolph, was representing Britney and brought her to Jive Records. And so she auditioned for us. There was 4 or 5 of us in the room, and Britney came in and auditioned. And, you know, you could tell straight away that the girl had a determination and a passion to succeed. And so after 2 or 3 weeks, we gave her what was then called a development deal. So in other words, we made a 3-month deal with her where we would put her in the studio and start to work with her and make sure that she was the right person. Because at that time, we'd already got the song Baby One More Time. And we were looking for, you know, the vehicle, if you like, or the artist to represent that song. And so that's how we found Britney. And
So you mentioned that was a 20-year gap from kind of first getting your foot into the music biz. Sort of, what's the express version of how you got from there to being one of the people who signed Britney Spears?
Well, I worked for 9 years in the record business before starting my own company, which was the Impulse Promotion Company. And what we were was basically marketeers, promotion people and salespeople. It was an independent company. It was mine. It grew. It actually ran for 14 years, and it grew to be the biggest marketing, sales and promotion company in the record business, the biggest one ever and the longest running. And so basically we then worked for every record label, every artist. We expanded into Europe, where we were hired from Europe. We were hired from America to work records in the UK. And so that company ran for 14 years, and during that 14 years, we had 67 number one records. So I suppose that made me industry famous. And from there, I was offered the job of a very small independent label called Jive Records.
And that was based in New York City, wasn't it?
No. Everybody thinks that, actually. Yeah. It was based in Willesden, London.
Was it? It's where my auntie Breeder lives, in Willesden.
Well, good on your auntie.
In Churchill
she
Road.
Should have popped in and done a number.
So that label was already going, and
yes.
That was a label that had a huge reputation. Just talk about some of the acts that you worked with there.
Well, I suppose one of the biggest to start with was Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and you'll remember Will Smith, who went on to become
a major, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Yeah. What was he like? Did you work with him?
Oh, yeah.
Lovely bloke?
Yeah. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I loved Will. He was always funny, and he was amazingly talented. But the thing about Will was he was the hardest working artist that I knew. You know, he worked it every single day. So whenever I see Will, you know, the success that he has, he absolutely deserves it. He was a great lad, Will. I like him a lot.
Kylie
was from slightly earlier, because Pete Waterman and I, of course, have been friends for... We were talking at dinner the other night, and we've been friends for 38 years. So in 1983, just to skip back... Pete started PWL and I started Impulse, and he came round the office and he went, I need you to work all my records. And I went, well, I need some records to work as well. And so we sort of formed our partnership, which was basically you make them, I'll sell them. And that was the partnership between PWL and Impulse. And of course, about 3 years later, we hit that golden streak with Kylie Minogue, Rick Astley, Bananarama, Jason Donovan.
Couldn't stop. I was a period couldn't stop having hits. I mean, it sounds all really easy now, and I'm sure it wasn't. A lot of work went behind it, but there was a period you couldn't open the door without having a hit.
We were on a golden run, that's for sure. And I feel very fortunate in that I had two golden runs, really. The Stock Aitken Waterman run was fantastic, but it was mainly UK-based. I mean, Rick Astley had hits in America, but we were mainly UK-based. But then when the Jive Records explosion came in 96, 97, with the Backstreet Boys and Britney and R. Kelly and Aaliyah and then Justin Timberlake and NSYNC, that explosion was worldwide, you know, so it was kind of a much bigger thing.
Steve, I've got to say, we've got to have you back in again. We've only scratched the surface. There's so many stories and layers. Seriously, I really want to, speak to you more, and I will do. Except we're going off for lunch with Joanne Malin in a moment. But it's great that you've chosen your hometown of Walsall to launch your book. If people want to see you, meet you, find out more, where can they see you over the next couple of days?
This afternoon at 2:30, I'm doing an author's visit at Walsall Library, and I'll be there for an hour or so. And then the big launch is on Saturday, and that's at the New Art Gallery in Walsall, and I'll be on stage at 12 noon.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant. I'm so grateful to you for coming in. And I say,
Pleasure, Adrian.
I could chat with you for yonks, absolutely yonks. Who is your favourite artist of all those that you have worked with over the years?
That's always a difficult question, but I would have to answer that with R. Kelly. because basically I had 27 hits with R. Kelly, and he was the most talented. He could write it, perform it, produce it, play it, sing it. He was the full ticket. So I would say R. Kelly.
Oh, brilliant stuff. Steve Jenkins, really appreciate your time today. Thank you. As he says, he's going to be at Walsall Library this afternoon at 2:30, sort of with an author's visit, and then at the New Art Gallery at 12 o'clock on Saturday in Walsall. And the name of the book is The Future is in the History.